At the time of Martin Luther's revolt against the Church of Rome, Henry VIII was the king in England. Like all other countries of Western Europe, people in Britain were extremely excited by the Reformation and the possibility for freedom. The problem was, for them at that moment, the king openly defended the Catholic Church and published a book to support the Catholic Church and the Pope and to argue against Luther's claims in Germany. Pope Leo X was so happy with the support of Henry VIII that he gave Henry VIII the title Defender of the Faith. This happened in 1522. Even today, despite the fact that Henry pretty much destroyed the Catholic Church in England a few years later, kings and queens of England still proudly claim the title. Obviously, they are not defending the Catholic faith, but the title sounds big and wonderful and is too hard to give up, I guess. You would want to have to admit that you're not the defender of the Roman Catholic faith anymore. The reason why Henry decided to go against the Catholic Church was that he wanted a divorce from his wife, Queen Catherine, so he could marry Anne Boleyn. The only way you could get a divorce in those days was to be granted a divorce by the Pope. The Pope did not grant the divorce right away as Henry wanted, and Henry decided he would secretly marry Anne Boleyn, which he did. The Pope was placed between a rock and a hard place, and he finally excommunicated the king, and Henry got mad that he was excommunicated, and he struck back. And Henry told the English Parliament that he wanted a law passed called the Act of Supremacy, and that was passed in 1534. This law said that nobody in England should obey anything the Pope said, and that the king was the supreme head of the church in England, and the law made it legal, basically, for the king to steal all the property and wealth of the Catholic Church, all the land, all the buildings, all the gold, all the silver, everything they had. Some monasteries were burned, all the monks were thrown out of the monasteries, so they would have to look after themselves. This law created the Church of England, and obviously the Church of England could make no honest claim to any possible right to priesthood authority based on that being passed on to them by the Catholic Church or the Pope, and could not claim any honest right to actually be a church approved of by God, since it was not based on any authority from Jesus or the apostles. Later, the Anglican Church invented a story that they did have the authority from one apostle whom they claimed had once come to England. At first, there was little difference in the doctrine taught between the Catholic Church and the Church of England, but the Church of England eventually got a creed and a plan of organization that gave them some distinctive features. During the reign of Edward VI, who was a Protestant who followed Henry VIII, and Queen Mary, who was a Catholic who followed Edward VI, and Queen Elizabeth, who was another Protestant who followed Queen Mary, there were all kinds of persecutions all over England, and many people were killed. Several interesting religious sects arose during these years, which have some influence in those of us who live in the western part of the world, Western America, I guess you might say, United States and Canada. And these were the Puritans and Separatists. The Separatists were very intense Puritans who believed that the Church in England was too much like the Catholic Church, and they left the Church of England to be all on their own. These groups were intensely persecuted by the Church of England, and many of the members of these churches fled to Holland for survival. The colony of the Puritans finally crossed the Atlantic Ocean to live in America. They probably would have all been killed off if they had stayed in England. The incredible persecutions which the saints were subjected to in the time of the apostles, the pain, the torture, the bloodshed that they suffered in defense of the testimony they had of Jesus Christ, the rise of the totally apostate church, the condemning of any reasonable thought, and the damning of the souls of men and women all over Europe and anywhere else the Catholic Church could get power. All these horrible things were prophesied by the Savior and the apostles and can be read of in the New Testament. Now, God did not design or approve these things, but God has allowed all men the right to damn themselves if they wish by using worldly power to corrupt lives or exercise power over innocent people, by being as evil and corrupt as we choose to be. God will make up to the righteous all that they lose here. Some of God's children were truly Christ-like, and others were evil to the very depths of their soul. Wycliffe and Huss, Luther and Zwingli, Calvin, Henry VIII, John Knox in Scotland, Roger Williams in America, these and many, many other men who were reformers worked better than they probably ever knew, because their efforts, at least in part, helped to prepare the foundation of future religious freedom and liberty of conscience to help us prepare for the restoration of the gospel in the last days, as has been divinely predicted by the Savior and the apostles also in the New Testament. From the 1500s down to our own time, cults and individuals claiming to have authority based on their own strange understandings of teachings of Christianity and many other philosophies have multiplied in virtually every nation of the earth. There are thousands of large and small groups in most major countries. On every side, the claim is there, lo, here is Christ, and lo, there is Christ. Oh, I got this special dream. Oh, this happened to me. Oh, this is right. Oh, everything else is wrong. There are Christian churches named after the place of their origin, like the Church of England. Others are named to honor their famous founders, such as the Lutherans, the Calvinists, the Wesleyans. Others are known for some particular creed or doctrine that they profess, such as the Methodists, the Presbyterians, and the Baptists. But it is amazing that until the 1800s, there was no church even claiming the name or title of the Church of Jesus Christ. The only church existing up to that time that claimed to have authority by succession from the Savior and apostles was the Catholic Church, which, as I have shown, was totally without any righteous claim to the priesthood authority or approval of their teachings and behavior as a church or as leaders, because they had changed everything. If the so-called Mother Church was so obviously without any authority from God and was totally lacking in any righteousness to have any right to claim to have spiritual power, the same spiritual power that the apostles had, how can the popes, cardinals, bishops, and other leaders of that church ever receive from the body of the church or from other leaders the right to lead and minister and the right to have revelation in the things of God? The simple truth is that you can't receive from anyone something they do not have to give you. So the leaders didn't have anything to give to the priests and the bishops. Does it make any sense to claim that the stupidity that man, does it make any sense at all to claim the stupidity that man can create by and for himself a phony and corrupt church which God will then honor and respect? No, that's a purely stupid thing. You cannot create something for yourself and then claim God will honor it. Obviously, men can and do create among themselves many societies and associations, religious and other groups, if they choose, and obviously men can create laws and rules and guidelines for all these organizations, and they can force the laws to apply to people who join the group. But these are human creations, and obviously they have no right or authority to the holy priesthood, without which there can be no Church of Jesus Christ. Any group or organization created by human desires has never been and never will be the Church of Jesus Christ on earth. And any of the so-called saving ordinances or performances that they want you to go through are nothing other than wishful thinking, no matter how sincere the individuals who participate in them. People other than John the Baptist were baptizing people in Israel during the time of the Savior. However, until the Savior passed that authority on to his apostles, nobody else had the right. Nobody else had the authority. They could get people wet, but that was all it was. They were getting people wet. The people were not forgiven any of their sins. They were not members of the Church of Jesus Christ. Nothing. There was no forgiveness for the sins, no rebirth into a new being, because the baptism was not approved by God and not done by God's authority. The scriptures make this plain. Without the authority from God, given as the Savior ordained his apostles, no person anywhere has the right to claim to be a leader approved of by God. This very brief, and I want to emphasize just how brief this is. I have about 3,000 pages of documentation that I haven't used yet to go through this apostasy. But this brief and incomplete historical review of the Great Apostasy does not require any intense or condemnatory study of the Roman Catholic Church or any of the numerous Protestant denominations that have come into existence and broken away from the so-called Mother Church. The apostasy was totally complete as far as actual loss of priesthood and cessation of spiritual power in the church was concerned, long before the revolt of the people against the Catholic Church in the 1500s and 1600s, which is known in history as the Reformation.